ancient word this morning is from Luke chapter 12, verses 22 to 34. Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to the span of your life? If then you are not able to do so small a thing as that, why do you worry about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not keep seeking what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that seek all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And our contemporary word is from Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. To those who need profound succor and strength to enable them to live in the present with dignity and creativity, Christianity often has been sterile and of little avail. It is not a singular thing to hear a sermon that defines what should be the attitude of the Christian toward people who are less fortunate than himself. This impulse at the heart of Christianity is the human will to share with others what one has found meaningful to oneself, elevated to the height of a moral imperative. But there is lurking a danger in this emphasis. It has long been a matter of serious moment that for decades we have studied the various peoples of the world and those who live as our neighbors as objects of missionary endeavor and enterprise, without being at all willing to treat them either as brothers or as human beings. The masses of men live with their backs constantly against the wall. They are the poor, the disinherited, the dispossessed. What does our religion say to them? The issue is not what it counsels them to do for others whose need may be greater, but what religion offers to meet their own needs. May the Lord bless to our understanding this reading.
Our theme today is freedom and belonging. It's an invitation to transformation of our hearts, our minds, our spirits, maybe even our bodies. I'm drawing today quite a bit on the work of Howard Thurman and others who have read Thurman's work. And one of the things I noted as I prepared is that Thurman very rarely discusses any biblical passage at length. It's not his mode. Thurman will pull a quote here and there, or he'll tell a story that evokes for us something from Scripture. So who was this Howard Thurman? He was born in 1899 in Daytona, Florida. He's an African-American family. His grandmother, who lived with the family as he grew up, had been born into slavery and told him many stories of that time. He became a minister, a scholar, a teacher, a sage, some people would say. And he's one of the founders of the Church for the Fellowship of All People, which he was founded in 1944, and he was there till 1953. And this was an interracial church, not part of any particular denomination, and went beyond Christianity in its study and teaching. And above all, Thurman was known as being a mystic. He was someone who, in talking about his childhood, could describe mystical experiences. There's one where he talks about being along the shore, the ocean shore at night, and just experiencing a complete oneness with the air and the ocean and the sand and the stars. And I was reminded that he didn't actually connect that experience of oneness with his strong Christian upbringing until he was an adult. It was just part of who he was. Just having this sense of being part of everything, that he was part of everything and everything was in him. So there's always a little bit of a background of that mystical experience in his writings. And for those who enjoy our CCMV history, he preached here at least once on September 26, 1946. He did a pulpit exchange with Art Cassidy, the minister here, and they were involved together in work supporting the Japanese American people who were at that point held in internment camps in various parts, mostly of the western US, and other justice work. But we recognize Thurman, and especially his early writing, as focusing on African American experience. But he was not ignorant of the broad range of human experience. He has this phrase, "backs against the wall," that Harding quoted in our reflection at the beginning of the day. And he talks about how the African American people lived with their backs against the wall, that they were pressed by the economic and political and social patterns of life in this country. And so his book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was written especially to those who shared that experience with him. He liked to talk about liberation. He said, for example, often to be free means the ability to deal with the realities of one's own situation so as not to be overcome by them. I think that's for all of us, not just for his initial African American audience. And he says, in the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whisper of the heart, giving strength to weakness, courage to fear, hope to despair. Thurman wrote about how Jesus would juxtapose his very visible ministry in the world of feeding and healing people with times of silent prayer by himself off on the mountain or into the wilderness. And he commented, and I connect this with our gospel reading today too, the reign of God is within you. So we heard about God giving us the kingdom, and Thurman tells us that reign of God is within you. So everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little bit of heaven behind. Don't hate or fear anyone. Love others. Love, period. But beginning with yourselves. Beginning with your people. So we start with that love, with ourselves and with our own group of people here. For Thurman, Christianity, as Jesus taught it, which wasn't Christianity yet, the teachings of Jesus were a technique of survival for the oppressed. And he would comment that in the intervening years, those teachings somehow had become a religion of the powerful and the dominant, used sometimes as an instrument of oppression. And we certainly sang about that already this morning, and we're well aware of our nation's history as we look back from this 250th anniversary. But for Thurman, that's not the way Jesus was. He understood Jesus as one who enabled the oppressed to gather courage, fresh courage. And a phrase he often used, Jesus announced the good news that fear, hypocrisy, and hatred, the three hounds of hell that track the trail of the disinherited, need have no dominion over them. So for Thurman, the quest is for a liberating spirituality, where societal transformation and human personal transformations are joined creatively. He's looking for an emancipatory way of being. As Vincent Harding said, a fundamentally unchained life. I recognize that in Thurman's earlier writings, especially this Jesus and the Disinherited, he wasn't writing to me. But when I read this book, I feel like he is writing to me. He has such a grasp of the human heart and the perils of being human, how easy it is for us to be drawn away from that center, that what he called altar in the heart, where our deepest convictions for love and justice reside, where our mystical sense of belonging resides. It's so easy for us to be pulled away from that. And he asks us not to lose our humanity, not to forfeit our souls. He says, there are no excuses for avoiding a path of courageous, creative integrity, for avoiding a path where we can refuse that fear, hypocrisy, and hatred. So for the ultimate issue is to become more free than we have ever been, free to engage our fullest powers in the transformative tasks that await us at the wall. Now, Vincent Harding, writing about Thurman in the 1990s, commented that were Thurman writing with us today, he would name the many others of us who find our backs to the wall, which is everyone at some moment, but some people frequently, people who are not called white in this country, people who are gay or female or disabled, people who have a difference that has been used to separate them from what we understand as the freedom of a human being in this country and hopefully the world. He comments that social action, which is necessary, we need not only those times of contemplation and those times of recognizing that core of ourselves, but that social action, the ultimate purpose of social action brings us back to that very teaching. That when we take social actions to feed the poor, or clothe the naked, or house the homeless, or free the prisoner, when we take action, those things are important and essential, but the ultimate purpose behind it is to make it possible for each person to find that core, that self, that integrity that allows them to move in the world as free people. And he goes on to say, and I'm not talking here only of those who need to be fed, but of those who are withholding the food. Because in this whole social dynamic that we live within, those who deprive others by their policies or their practices or their words or their behaviors in any way, they too are suffering. They are suffering a disconnection from that place in the heart that reminds us that we are indeed all part of each other, that we are part of one grand cosmos of being. And to be separated is to suffer. He did actually, in Jesus and the Dispossessed, quote at one point Luke's comment, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." And it is this kingdom, this sense that we have been given the most fundamental aspects of love and identity. In that same section of, it's in chapter 2 of the book, and in that same section of the chapter, he says, "Several years ago, I was talking with a young German woman who had escaped from the Nazis, first to Holland, then France, England, and finally to America. She described for me the powerful magnet that Hitler was to German youth. The youth had lost their sense of belonging. That's our other theme today. Freedom comes with belonging." So his friend said, "They did not count. There was no center of hope for their marginal egos. According to my friend, Hitler told them, 'No one loves you. I love you. No one will give you work. I will give you work. No one wants you. I want you.' And when they saw the sunlight in his eyes, they dropped their tools and followed him. He stabilized the ego of the German youth and put it within their power to overcome their sense of inferiority." Thurman comments, "It's true that in the hands of a man like Hitler, power is exploited and turned to ends which make for havoc and misery. But this should not cause us to ignore the basic soundness of the theory upon which he operated. And that theory was that we need to belong. We need to be recognized. We need to find a place where we matter. And that, I think, too, falls into Thurman's idea of what we do when we feed the hungry, is we are not only giving them food, we are placing ourselves with them and saying, "You matter to me." and for Thurman, ultimately, you matter to God. Thurman is thoroughly Christian, and yet he very seldom uses the kind of conventional Christian language, vocabulary that we might have been accustomed to in other writers. And as I said, he doesn't talk about Scripture in detail. And yet, his understanding of Jesus, which is behind all of his teachings, can help us, I think, go back and read any of those other materials and maybe translate those into language that might have made sense to Thurman and might make more sense to us in our current moment. He talks about courage and the need for courage. And he says, nothing less than a great daring in the face of overwhelming odds can achieve the inner security in which fear cannot possibly survive. It's true that a person cannot be serene unless they possess something about which to be serene. Here we reach the high water mark of prophetic religion, and it is of the essence of the religion of Jesus of Nazareth. Of course, God cares for the grass of the field, which lives a day and is not more, or the sparrow that falls unnoticed by the wayside. God also holds the stars in their appointed places, leaves God's mark in every living thing, and God cares for me. To be assured of this becomes the answer to the threat of violence, and even to violence itself. To the degree to which a person knows this, they are unconquerable from within and without. As I've followed this missing page, here it is. This question through this past week, I was listening to other voices as well. So, for example, I listened yesterday to an interview with Cornel West, who's one of our contemporary African-American theologian, ethicist, philosophers on the scene. And West reminds us that as we celebrate this 250th anniversary of our nation, that we have to let go of any belief that we were ever innocent of the kinds of concerns that Thurman talks about. That we have to let go of the belief that our nation was founded in some pure benevolence. Because at that very time, as we know, people were held in slavery and native people were being pushed off their land and killed. We know these things. And so part of our challenge for ourselves and for this moment is to learn how to hold all of that at once. Because within our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, that all are endowed by their Creator with inalienable rights. Within that, not expressed and not fully expressed in any way, is a vision that has enabled some of the dramatic changes in our nation's history. The abolition of slavery. Including women and African Americans and all people with the right to vote. Just a couple examples. We talked last week about equal marriage rights. We've seen many moves in this nation to make the intuition that underlies that declaration come to fruition. So I do think that that we have a heritage, both religious and political, that we can draw on in this moment. It's a challenging moment for many of us, knowing how we can go from that place of inner integrity that we cultivate, how we can go from that place to whatever kind of social action we are called to do. And certainly there are many political voices out there calling for some political action. But others are reminding us that every action that we take to bring justice in the world, whether it's teaching someone to read, or bringing them a meal, or accompanying them in their last years, that these are all part of creating that community of belonging. And that each one of us has been born in a given situation with given gifts, given capacities. Our situation has given us particular opportunities, and it's not our task to try to look for all the opportunities, but to find which are the ones that speak to us and call us into action. So I've been grateful this week for Howard Thurman. I was saying to Annie on our drive over this morning that when I do go back and read Thurman, in some ways, he is the one who calls, of the spiritual teachers I read, who calls to me most deeply. And perhaps it's because I have insisted myself on remaining within the Christian tradition in spite of all its contradictions. I've even insisted on remaining in the congregational tradition in which I was raised, in spite of all its contradictions. Because this is the place where I was placed. And I think for each of us, we can ask, where have I been placed? And it might not be what is so obvious. It might be geographic or it might not. It might be religious, it might not. It might be practical, it might not. We don't know. But that's part of cultivating that inner integrity, learning to recognize that we are in the place that we have been given. Now is the moment when I realized that I actually left the last page unprinted because I thought I only had 4 pages instead of 5. And so I'd just like to go back and speak again from the words of Howard Thurman. The reign of God is within you, so everywhere you go ought to leave a little heaven behind. Don't hate or fear anyone. Love others. Love, period. Love, period. Amen. We have some